Chapter 18. You are listening at Novel Full. Audio. Intimacy. It was deep in the night. The moon hung in the sky. Xu Huan sat in front of the dressing table and looked at the delicate handmade gold bracelet in her hand. She used to think that jewelries made of gold was tacky. But the light that came from this pair of bracelets under the light would obviously make people exclaim in admiration. To the present her, whether a jewelry was beautiful or not wasn't the most important thing. The most important thing was its value. This pair of golden bracelets was heavy in her palm. It gave her a lot of security. Presumably most of her future would depend on them. Xu Huan sighed and put the pair of golden bracelets in a rosewood jewelry box. Then, she picked up that jade annulus that symbolizes good fortune and looked at it. Just then, behind her came the sound of the curtain being lifted. She panicked and quickly put the jade in the jewelry box. Then, she closed the lid. The one who came in was Gu Shiran. She could hear the laughter in his voice. You looked at them the whole night. Is it still not enough? It seemed that she had long been discovered by him. Not enough. Xu Huan's face reddened and she still pretended that nothing was the matter. I came from a poor family and am short-sighted. I've never seen such valuable things. Naturally, I have to look longer at them. Gu Shiran revealed a profound smile. When women like money, usually it's because they lack sense of security. Xu Huan wanted to refute. She opened her mouth but found out that she couldn't refute him. His words were somewhat reasonable. At least, that was the case for her. Yi Shu said in her book, Loving Jewel. I have a lot of love. If there's no love, then I have a lot of money. If neither is available then, health was also great. In the past, she possessed many loves from her parents, families and friends. These loves made her life worry-free. Now, she only had health left. Although, she didn't lack food and clothing for the time being, but those were given by others. She had to exchange self-respect and freedom for them. If one day, the other party doesn't want to give anymore, he could retract at any moment. He didn't even have to give her a reason and explanation. Then, aside from accumulating a bit of valuable things for herself to leave a way out for her, what else could she do? After all, she didn't have a long-lasting sense of security. It happened that hard work and relying on oneself was useless for the women of this age. It made it impossible for her to even find a sense of security in a career. Xu Huan's enthusiasm came to an end. She pushed the jewelry box onto the end of the dressing table and stood up. Come here. Gu Shiran leaned against the bed rail and beckoned at her with his index finger. Xu Huan lowered her eyes and walked obediently to him. Does second young master want to drink tea? Gu Shiran shook his head and looked at her for a moment. Suddenly, he grabbed one of her hands and pulled her into his arms. This was too unexpected. When she was pulled into his arms, Xu Huan smelled a faint smell of medicine. She didn't recover her senses yet, when his chin came close to her ear. He used a very low voice to slowly say, when two people are together, would you feel more sense of security being like this? There was a subtle trace of seduction in his voice as if it had a hypnotic effect. While she was absent-minded, she had been turned over and pressed down by him. Panicked, Xu Huan wanted to reach out and push him away. However, although he was weak from the illness, the weight of his body was still there. She pushed for a bit, but couldn't push him away. She saw his eyes smile at her full of seduction. This smile was like a ripple making her heart and soul shake. Only in this short moment of absent-mindedness, his handsome face lowered to hers. Xu Huan nervously tightened her body and hurriedly said, Don't. The voice was very low. So low that it seemed like she was begging. Gu Shiran hesitated for a moment. The kiss that was supposed to fall on her lips landed on her forehead. It felt slightly warm. After the kiss, Gu Shiran pushed up his body slightly up. His finger played with the belt of her robe. He looked at her in the eyes and asked with a somewhat hoarse voice, "You don't want?" From the moment that Xu Huan was born till now, this was the first time she had been so close to a man. What scared her the most was that she didn't feel disgust at his closeness to her. She only knew that she was very nervous. So nervous that she felt a bit overwhelmed. At this time, she couldn't even speak. The only thing she could do was shake her head and shake her head again. Oh. Of course she wasn't willing. One step further was a consignation to eternal damnation. If it was someone else, someone who didn't make her feel so much danger, she might have considered surrendering her body if there was no way out, and become that person's wife and then ignore his existence and live her peaceful days. But Gu Shiran wouldn't do. She felt something unclear towards him. An unclear sense of familiarity. Besides, she felt that he was very dangerous. So dangerous that there was a possibility that when she surrenders her body, she might surrender her heart together with it. Once she had formed feelings for him, she couldn't ignore his matters anymore. Love was something selfish. She would want to monopolize him. She would become a repulsive and jealous wife. In the end, she would suffer, he would suffer, and others would suffer. Not willing. After shaking her head for a while, she gradually regained her senses. Although, the words that came out were like the voice of a mosquito. Gu Shiran's look was hidden with depth. She didn't know what he was thinking. He played with her belt and looked at her for a long time. Finally, he let go and his lips curved up a bit, revealing a faintly mocking smile. "You said you don't want to. Later, don't say that I was inhuman." The voice was low and had infinite seduction in it. Xu Huan recalled the conversation in the yard at noon. She suddenly blushed. She said angrily from shyness, "Get up quickly." Gu Shiran hadn't moved yet, when the sound of the curtain being lifted was heard. Concubine Yun came in with a smile, "Second young master, I made nourishing soup." She didn't finish speaking and was already silent. Xu Huan looked at the entrance. She saw that concubine Yun froze there with a face of astonishment and helplessness. That astonishment became grief and resentment. Her long eyelashes trembled, and she couldn't control her eyes from becoming red. Xu Huan was very speechless. Xu Huan had the feeling of being caught in an adulterous act in bed. Although, her identity was there and didn't have to explain anything to concubine Yun, she still felt very awkward. Her face became redder. Flustered, she pushed Gu Shiran. At this time, Gu Shiran didn't move anymore. He didn't even turn his head. He only said faintly, "Put the soup on the table. Next time when you come in, remember to notice first." Yes, concubine Yun's voice was so low that it hardly could be heard. It could be imagined how embarrassed and hurt she must feel. Xu Huan turned her gaze and didn't look at her anymore. It was so embarrassing. She didn't dare to move and looked at Gu Shiran like this. She didn't know how much time had passed. It seemed to be just a moment, but it also felt to be forever until the room was quiet again and there was no more sound. Only now did Gu Shiran smile faintly and let her get up. Xu Huan panicked, went to the other side of the bed and held the quilt. She looked at him with a bit of vigilance. This bastard was really abominable. The moment he found out that his body was not sick anymore, he turned into a lecher. Gu Shiran laughed in spite of himself. "Why are you being like this? I haven't forced you. You attacked sneakily. Too shameless." "Did I?" Gu Shiran showed a face full of innocence. "Didn't I give you a prior notice a long time ago?" That was also considered a notice. She had long forgotten the matters that happened at noon. "Forget it, let's not keep tangling on this matter." Xu Huan changed her tone and probed, "Can I change places to sleep?" Gu Shiran didn't even think about it. "No." "Why? There are no more empty rooms. Or, why don't you go sleep with Yun Yen in the west chamber?" "Never." Xu Huan shook her head. Concubine probably hates her to death now. If she went over, then she really was blind. See, it's that you are unwilling. It's not that I don't let you go. While Gu Shiran said that, he ignored the bowl of nourishing soup Concubine Yin brought in, took off his outer robe and blew out the candle. Xu Huan sat in the dark and didn't move. After a while, she heard Gu Shiran say, "If you don't lie and sleep now, I will repeat what I have just done to you. This time, I will not stop." A clear threat. Fortunately, after living together these 3 days, Xu Huan knew that he wasn't a despicable person. From the meaning of those words, she understood that he no longer had the intentions to make things hard for her. She obediently lay down on the bed. However, her body was still close to the wall and far away from him. If the mind was too tensed up, it was easy to get tired. Although, she told herself not to fall asleep before Gu Shiran fell asleep, in the end, she unconsciously fell asleep. She didn't know that Gu Shiran came closer to her in the dark. He gently wrapped a finger around her hair and played with it. He said in a low voice, "If there isn't you at my side, I also don't have a sense of security." Chapter 19. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Hostility. Xu Huan had a habit that couldn't be considered good nor bad. While sleeping, she had to hug something to get a peace mind. If her arms were empty, she would feel that something was missing. Before she time-traveled, there had always been 2 stuffed toys in her bed. Usually, she could use them as something to lean on while sitting, and when she was sleeping, she could hug them. After she time-traveled, she didn't have that anymore. Fortunately, the weather was warm. Thus, sometimes, there was no need to use the thin blankets to cover the body and she could roll them into a ball and hug it. However, when she woke up this morning, she noticed that the ball she was hugging in her arms felt very odd. When she opened her eyes, she discovered that her head was against Gu Shiran's chin. Her whole body was curled up in his arms. One hand held his body. One leg was overbearingly placed above his legs. She was completely entangled onto him like an octopus. This pose was too shameful. Xu Huan had always known that her sleeping habit wasn't very elegant. Only now did she discover that it was not elegant to this extent. While she was startled, her heart was beating chaotically. Seeing that Gu Shiran still had his eyes closed, she wanted to quickly and lightly break free from his arms. She didn't expect that when she moved slightly, Gu Shiran would also move slightly. He reached out and held her waist tighter. Their 2 bodies got even closer. So close that she could feel the difference in his body. Her expression immediately turned weird. She didn't care anymore whether she would wake him up. She pried his arm away and sat up on the bed. Gu Shiran slept very lightly, so he was immediately awakened by her movement. It was just that his consciousness was still vague. He opened his eyes slightly and looked at her. He muttered, "Did you wake up?" When Xu Huan sat up, she discovered that she was almost squeezed to the wall. There was a lot of space left on his side. She immediately understood that the reason for that sleeping pose was because he crossed over to her side. If she was asleep, she couldn't reject him. If there was something next to her hand, she naturally would hug it. She wanted to angrily reprimand him, but she unexpectedly noticed that his voice sounded very tired. He seemed weak and without strength. She couldn't help but worry a bit. She reached out to touch his forehead as she feared that he got sick again. Fortunately, the temperature on his forehead was normal. It was just that the hand she'd reached out had been grasped by him. Gu Shiran opened his eyes once again. He smiled slightly and said, "Don't worry. I'm not sick. I'm only a bit tired." Xu Huan pulled her hand back and refuted, "Who was worried about you? It's just your own wishful thinking." After she said that, her face suddenly reddened. She quickly got out of bed and got far away from Gu Shiran. Her current body was still young, but her mental age was already mature. Even if she didn't experience many things before, she knew what was going on. She didn't dare to guess whether it was because of their sleeping position that Gu Shiran was so tired. However, the vigilance that she had against him last night reduced a bit. If they cuddled for the whole night and he didn't take any action, then he still could be considered a gentleman. Taking into account that he was so tired, she wouldn't bother his sleep anymore. Xu Huan tried to wash up as quietly as she could. Then, she went to old Madam's to pay her respect. She didn't know if it was because Gu Shihe pleaded for her or that it was because she already got punished, but old Madam's anger seemed to have lessened a lot. In short, every time she went to pay her respect in the next 10 days, although old Madam didn't receive her kindly and ignored her most of the time, she didn't mention the punishment. Besides, she only needed to stay there for little than half a day. Gu Shihe would always come over to interrupt and ask old Madam for permission to leave. Then, he will drag her back to Plum Flower Pavilion to tease the pets. This shortened the time a lot that was spent on teaching her the rules. It could be said that she managed to cope with the elders. The simple and peaceful days let her anxious and confused heart gradually settle down. She also got to know a lot of things these past few days. For example, Master Gu, Duda took a lot of concubines plus his former wife Yang Shi and his second wife Lin Shi. He had 4 sons and 3 daughters. 2 sons and a daughter had married. Among these children, Master Gu valued the eldest son Gu Shitian the most. Old Madam favored the youngest son Gu Shihe the most. The other children were looked after by their biological mother. Although, they weren't that favored, but at least they had someone who cared about them. Only, Gu Shiran's mother and the illegitimate third daughter Gu Xian's mother had passed away, so in this Gu household, it could be considered that they were treated the coldest. Gu Shiran was treated a bit better. Although, he was sick the whole year and had never gone out, but after all he was from the legitimate line, so no one dared to be irreverent towards him. However, Gu Xian's mother was a singer. Master Gu took a fancy on her and bought her. It could be considered that she was a concubine of the lowest rank. Her status was so low that it wasn't worth mentioning. Gu Xian was still young. She was only 12 years old. It could be imagined how hard her days were. She didn't know whether it was sympathy or that she felt that Gu Xian's situation was similar to hers. Ever since knowing these, Xu Huan paid special attention to that pretty and lovely little girl. After only observing for a few days, she discovered that Gu Xian's personality was obviously different from that of children of the same age. She wasn't lively, but was abnormally quiet. Every time, she only brought one personal maid to come pay her respect. She came in quietly. After paying her respect, she also left quietly. If one didn't pay attention, one wouldn't notice her existence at all. Naturally, there was no chance to chat with her. One day, when Xu Huan was dragged out of Pine Crane Hall by Gu Shihe, she happened to meet her. Gu Xian knowingly made way for them and also respectfully greeted, second sister. Law, fourth little brother. Gu Shihe humped once, raised his head and felt that it was below his dignity to bother with her. Xu Huan greeted her and talked with her for a bit. She didn't expect that after a short while, Gu Shiren who was dressed in white came out. This time, he didn't greet anyone. He only glanced once at Gu Xian and then said coldly, "It's not early anymore. Why are you still standing there?" After he said this, he went into Pine Crane Hall with his head held up high. However, Gu Xian immediately panicked. She didn't even say goodbye and only looked once apologetically at Xu Huan. Then, she lifted her skirt and chased after Gu Shiren. Xu Huan looked at their backs for a moment. Gu Shihe grabbed her and said dissatisfied, "Come one. Only 2 geeks, what's there to look at? Geeks. Right. One was like ice that could freeze people. The other was like a stone that could bore people to death. I hate them the most in this household. Even Madam told me to not interact with them." Xu Huan was startled. "They are your brother and sister. They are your family." "What family?" Gu Shihe disapproved, bastards born by lowly concubines. Shu Huan was speechless for a long moment. Those words are really unpleasant to hear. They didn't provoke you. Don't say that again in the future. Didn't provoke me. Gu Shihe said angrily, you didn't see how those concubines used all kinds of efforts to fight over my father. Even Madame said they are lowly concubines. Why can't I say it? She had seen those concubines of Master Gu. Some were young. Some were old. They looked very well behaved and honest. In front of old Madame, they were docile and rarely spoke. It was Lin Shi who looked like the astute one. However, one couldn't judge a book by its cover. Who knew what they did behind her back? Shu Huan was skeptical about his words. Fortunately, these things didn't have anything to do with her. It was enough to only listen to it. She wasn't qualified and didn't want to be nosy, so she just said, I and second young master don't like hearing such words. In the future, you should try to say them less. Gu Shihe glanced once at her. He turned his head, humphed and ignored her. Chapter 20 You are listening at novelfull.audio. Unfamiliar father and mother Shu Huan knew that the reason Gu Shihe got close to her these past few days was because Gu Shiran had some means to coax this child into being obedient. If it wasn't to give Gu Shiran face, presumably this little master wouldn't even look at her. So, she also didn't say more. She only went all the way with him to Plum Flower Pavilion. When the two were half-way, maid Huiyun walked up to them. She smiled and reported, second young mistress, master and madam. In law came. Second young master sent me over to ask if you want to see them or not. Shu Huan's mind went blank for a moment before she realized what kind of relationship this master and madam. In law had with her. They are the original owner's parents. Strangers that she had never seen before. Gu Shihe gestured impatiently with his hand, won't see, won't see. What do they take our Gu household for? Can anyone come when they want to? This, Huiyun hesitated. Shu Huan looked once at Gu Shihe and said, don't bother with him. Invite them in. Hey, this is my home. For which reason should she not bother with me? Gu Shihe wouldn't put up with it anymore. Shu Huan said in a not very good mood, they are my parents. They came to see me and not you. What are you getting agitated about? Gu Shihe was speechless because of her. He made a tisk sound, turned and ran away. He probably foresaw that there was no fun at Plum Flower Pavilion and went to play elsewhere. It was a good thing that he left. Shu Huan went back by herself. At this time, her heart was more or less perturbed. She had to go see two people who she was supposed to be the most familiar with, who happened to be complete strangers to her. This feeling was indescribable strange. To be honest, she wasn't eager to see the couple from Shu family. However, these past few days, she hadn't thought of a proper way to leave Gu household. She had to explore whether her maiden family was reliable. Nevertheless, she didn't carry much hope with her. She felt that since Shu family was already so poor that they disregarded their daughter's happiness and married her into a wealthy family in hope that the great event of joy would drive away his bad luck and hasten his recovery, then, they had no reason to take their daughter back. At most she would talk about the background of the original owner when meeting them this time and also see what kind of people her parents were. That was all. When she returned to Plum Flower Pavilion, that Shu couple hadn't been invited in yet. Gu Shiran kept the habit of sunbathing every day. He was sitting in the yard. These past few days, his body seemed to have gotten better. His daily movements had become more smoothly. However, she didn't know what he was thinking. In front the maids, he would ask for help from time to time and still pretended to weak and ill. It happened that concubine Yun was very cooperative. Every few days, she would personally cook a variety of nourishing soups before a meal. She said it was to nourish Gu Shiran's body. In the end, Gu Shiran couldn't drink it all by himself. So, He gave half of it to Xu Huan every day and forced her to drink it. But it was in the summer and she wasn't a weak patient. Xu Huan really couldn't drink this kind of thing. She lied, just now, I already ate dessert at old madam's. Now, I'm too full to drink it. Really? Gu Shiran looked at her with a smile that was not yet a smile. After living together for these past few days, Xu Huan didn't dare to say that she knew his temperament very well, but she was clear on that when he showed this kind of expression, his mind was already planning something bad. If she didn't listen to him, in the end, the one who would be unfortunate would certainly be her. She couldn't refuse. Just take it as drinking medicine. Xu Huan walked over while frowning. She took half a bowl of soup from Xiangqian. After blowing on it, she put the bowl against her lips. When drinking it, her expression was very brave. It was just that the taste of today's soup was very strange. It was hard to finish it all at once. As a result, she saw Xiangqian scoop soup for Gu Shiran. She accidentally scooped some ingredients of the soup. Wasn't that white strange thing a seahorse? And that thing that looked like a worm was caterpillar fungus. After this one look, her stomach turned. Originally, she still intended to control it and not vomit, but the soup that she had drunk already came back up. In the end, she had to cover her mouth, ran to where the plants and flowers were and vomited. Seeing her like this, Gu Shiran raised an eyebrow and asked, "What is in the soup?" Concubine Yun's face showed nervousness as she answered, "Deer meat, red dates, caterpillar fungus and long-nosed seahorse." Long-nosed seahorse. Gu Shiran said, "Let me take a look." Xiangqian brought the pot to him. When Gu Shiran saw the caterpillar fungus, he didn't have an abnormal reaction. After seeing the seahorse, he also couldn't help but frown. He hasn't spoken yet, when Huiyun brought a middle-aged couple in. She smiled and reported, "Second young master, master and madam in law are invited in." When Xu Huan heard this, she originally wanted to go meet them, but at this moment her mouth was full of that strange taste. She still felt nausea. So, she bent and vomited for a while. While she vomited, she rushed to say, "Tea. Give me some to wash away the taste." Hearing this, Xiangqian rushed to the chamber to get tea. When the Shu couple entered, they were ill at ease. They didn't know whether they should see their daughter first or greet their son-in-law first. Now, when they saw Xu Huan vomit, they exchanged a glance and revealed a surprised and happy smile. That Su sure couldn't bother with anything else and clasped her hands while laughing. "Aya, what a coincidence. Could it be that we really caught up with Miss Morning Sickness? Then, I have to first congratulate son-in-law. Morning Sickness." When she said this, the faces of all the people in the yard changed. Hearing this, Xu Huan spat out the mouthful of tea that was in her mouth and coughed. Gu Shiran's expression also turned extremely weird. It seemed that he was trying to hold in a laughter. Even concubine Yun's expression paled a bit. It happened that Su Shi didn't see that their expressions were strange. She went to support Xu Huan while she laughed and said, "I didn't expect that little Huan is so blessed. The moment you married, you got pregnant. In the future." She didn't finish when concubine Yun suddenly said, "Not right." This interruption was sudden, so everyone looked at her. Only now did concubine Yun discover that she had a slip of tongue. She couldn't help but explain, "Second young mistress only married for about 10 days. Even if she was blessed and got pregnant, she shouldn't have such a big reaction now." Only after she'd said this did Su Shi wake up to the reality. She was also someone who had given birth before, so she knew very well how long it would take for one to have a response to pregnancy. Just now, the joy got over her head and she didn't think that the days weren't right. Now, she couldn't help but feel a bit upset. She regretted that she spoke so fast and made such a mistake. Her face immediately showed annoyance. Chapter 21. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The reason of the visit concubine Yun also regretted in her heart, but she didn't show it on her face. While she led the Shu couple to the living room of the main chamber, she called the maids to serve tea. It was really a farce. Shu Huan had suppressed the feeling of nausea and let out a sigh of relief. She looked up and saw that the smile on Gu Shiran's face was a bit mischievous. Her face reddened. She didn't ask if he wanted to see the guests together and walked to the living room by herself. Before she entered the living room, she saw that Su Shi held concubine Yun's hand and asked how many years it had been since she entered Gu household and whether she had any children. She also kept praising, "That son-in-law of mine is really lucky. Even the concubines are so good-looking. See how pretty you are." Shu Huan wasn't a very eloquent person. Su Shi's speech made her feel that it was untimely, so she coughed twice to interrupt her. Concubine Yun was someone astute. She took this opportunity to quietly retrieve her hand and laughed, "Second young master's body is not well. Someone has to take care of him. I will go out to take a look." While talking, she left with all the maids, leaving only Shu Huan and the Shu couple to talk in the room. She didn't know what to say and she felt awkward calling them father and mother. Shu Huan looked at them. They looked young and seemed to be in their 30s. Shu Fu looked very honest. Now, there was no outsiders in the room anymore, but he still had his body slightly bent and was ill at ease. It seemed that he was used to nod his head and bow at people. He couldn't change his habit of lowering himself. From time to time, he would steal a look at the furnishing in the room. It seemed like he was scared by it. He retrieved his gaze flustered. Even the smile on his face was very stiff. It had the awkwardness of not knowing what to do. Sure wore a brand new fine hemp clothing. Her eyebrows had been finely done. The corners of her eyes were slightly slanted. It could be seen that she was pretty when she was young. She didn't know whether it was because she was poor or something else, but when she reached middle age, she gave a feeling of someone who came from the haunts of common people. That was the feeling of tackiness and shrewdness intertwined together. It couldn't be hidden and revealed itself. While she was looking at them, that Su Shi walked to the door and looked out of the curtain. Only after seeing that concubine Yun was truly talking with Gu Shiran did she turn and come back. She looked once at Shu Huan and her gaze fell on her flat belly. She frowned while she said, "Did you get pregnant?" Who would have thought that the first thing she asked was this? Shu Huan immediately became speechless. Fortunately, it seemed that Su Shi just asked. It didn't seem like she was waiting for her to answer. Then, she lowered her voice, "I think that concubine is someone clever and astute. Not to mention that she is beautiful and charming and have the gentleness that men like. You should take out a bit of your status as the main wife and put her in her place. Then, think of ways to hold on to son-in-law's heart and quickly give birth to a child. Only after that will you enjoy the luxurious life forever." While talking, she asked, "I saw that son-in-law's body doesn't seem so weak as rumored. Did he sleep in your chamber these past few days? He didn't get hooked away by that concubine, right?" How should Shu Huan answer these questions? She really didn't want to continue this topic. So, she vaguely skipped over it. She wanted them to sit and have tea. Then, she would leisurely ask why Shu Fu thought about coming today to visit her. Shu Fu hasn't answered yet when Su Shi angrily said, "We've long came over to send gift on the third day of the marriage. Those hateful housekeepers acted like a snob and looked down on us. They sent us away by saying that old madam didn't want to see us. That we could come in today was because of the faces of you two, SHGXR. We thought that since son-in-law's birthday was getting closer, we came to congratulate him to fulfill the etiquette requirements. If not, then if by chance son-in-law got angry, then your days won't be great anymore. As for the faces of those little servants, let's not mention them. For you, we will bear it." The tone of Su Shi made people feel very uncomfortable. Xu Huan slightly frowned and was a bit confused. From the looks of it, it didn't seem like the Xu couple knew about the original owner committing suicide by hanging. She didn't know whether it was because Gu household didn't send people to pass the news or that they deliberately kept this news a secret. The chance of the latter was higher. After all, it wasn't a decent matter. If it was spread, it would be easy for Gu household to become a joke. She didn't see that she was elsewhere with her thoughts. She kept complaining, "This time, when we entered, your father gave that keeper half a penny for him to go have a drink. Half a penny, ah. If you bought rice with it and add some other grain crops to it, it would be enough to last for 2 months. Hearing her mention money, Xu Huan snapped out of her thoughts. While she was calculating the price of here, she casually said, "Right." When Su Shi saw that she'd answered, she became more energetic. She let her see the food box she brought with her. "This is the gift we prepared for Sun.in.law. Fresh fruits, the 4 styles pastry of one family, the peaches of immortality and also a top-notch ink stone. These things are worth more than 2 silver liangs. 3 to 4 months of our household expenses was spent." Xu Huan said, embarrassed, "In fact, it would be fine if you've just made a pair of shoes for him. Gu household already has these things. There was no need to buy them." Shi raised one of those finely shaped eyebrows and objected, "How could that be fine? No matter if our family is very poor, we will even borrow money to let you hold your face high. How could we only give a simple pair of shoes?" Xu Huan sighed privately. Who in this Gu household didn't know that she came from a poor family? Even if Xu couple hollowed their house, Gu household may not necessarily fancy the things they gift. It was better to just honestly admit that they were poor and wholeheartedly make a pair of shoes. That would have more value. It was better than to swell one's face up by slapping it to look imposing. Shi glanced twice at the door. She came closer to her and asked, "What did you prepare for Sun.in.law? You must not let that concubine Yun come up with a better gift." Only now did Xu Huan remember that there was something important that she hasn't asked. When is his birthday? The look Su Shi gave her was that of fuming with rage between gritted teeth. Ever since young, you had the character of sand not being able to be put on the wall. You can even forget such an important thing. When the 2 families exchanged the age cards, wasn't it clearly written on it? The 22nd of June. Remember it well. She scolded her again, "Do you know how many people want to marry into Gu household? If it wasn't because I gave money to matchmaker Jiang, would it have been your turn? Second young mistress of Gu household. Such an honorable identity. In the future, the moment Gu household's old madam closed her eyes and the household is divided, then the one who would be in charge of the household is you. Listen carefully, don't be like a dough anymore that everyone can grasp. First, think of a way to firmly tie the man in your bed. As for that concubine, with one look you would know that she is a temptress. Catch an opportunity to quickly send her away. Even if you take 2 more for Sun.in.law, it would be better than putting a temptress here." Was this her mother? This was her mother. Compared to her genuine mother of the modern times, they really were people from 2 different worlds. Xu Huan was completely speechless. Fortunately, the original owner seemed to be someone of few words. Su Shi didn't find that anything was out of the ordinary and she also didn't seem to want her to answer. She continued to prattle without a care for other, "You don't have other skills. Only your hands seem to be skillful. Today is already the 20th of June. Even if I let you prepare something else, you won't have enough time. Just make a pair of shoes. Remember to use good quality material. Carefully make it. Even if you have to stay up late, you have to finish it before Sun.in.law's birthday." While talking, she picked up the tea on the table that had already turned cold. After she finished it, she stood up and said, "I and your father won't bother you anymore. Don't dawdle anymore. Quickly go make the shoes." After the speech, she pushed Xu Fu, why aren't you moving? Drink the tea and then let's leave. From the moment he entered till now, Shu Fu hasn't said a word. After being pushed by Su Shi, he picked up the tea and drank it. Then, he rubbed his mouth with his sleeve. He took the food box and left. However, after taking just a few steps, he felt that something was not right. He smiled embarrassed at Shu Huan and stuffed the food box in her hands. Chapter 22. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Who is the little fat sheep? If Shu Huan had to describe Su Shi with one word, then nothing could surpass the word fussy. She suddenly came to visit and said so many words like pouring beans out of a bamboo tube. She also didn't wait for people to react and just said that she was leaving. Hearing this, Shu Huan felt greatly relieved. She chased after them, wanting to send them out. However, she didn't expect that Su Shi just reached the door when she suddenly turned back and revealed a fawning smile at her. Shu Huan was terrified. Mother.do, you have something else to instruct. It took her a lot of effort to spit out the word mother. Fortunately, it was mother and not mom. Otherwise, it would be very difficult for her to bear it mentally. It's nothing. Su Shi unexpectedly began to act shy. She even reached out to shove Shu Fu a bit. Shu Fu looked at her and then looked at Shu Huan with an expression of wanting to say something but didn't know how to say it. Because she got curious, Shu Huan urged, there are no outsiders here. If you have something to say, just say it. Shu Fu was elbowed again and finally opened his mouth, little Huan. She wanted to faint. This Shu couple was really a match made from heavens. One was impetuous like charcoal. The other was soft like plain water. In the end, it was Su Shi who couldn't hold back anymore. She glared once at Shu Fu and then said, to give you face, all the last bit of the family's money had been used to prepare gifts. We also had pawned many things. Now, we are so poor that we can't even buy rice. Your little brother also has reached the age to attend school. We couldn't even gather enough for teacher Jing's payment. Little Huan, do you have some private money? Borrow some to us for the urgency. She went through such a big circle just for this. Shu Huan's personality was a bit straightforward, so she didn't like to ponder over hidden schemes. However, this didn't mean that she was so stupid as to being sold and still count the money for that person. So, she went silent for a while and then asked, did you spend all the betrothal gifts given by Gu household? After this question, the expression of Shu couple immediately turned uncomfortable. Shu Fu revealed an ashamed expression. He stole a glance at Su Shi's temper was more shrewish. She was only deadlocked for a short while. After that, she licked her finger and said, you aren't a housekeeper and don't know how expensive food is. I and your father married and not sold a daughter off. How much could this betrothal gift be? Then, let me calculate for you. The money for that matchmaker Jiang was borrowed. We have to repay that, right? Half of the money of the betrothal gift was gone because of this alone. Raising you until you became so big also needed countless money. We pawned so many things. We need to go buy them back, right? Another half of the money is gone. The little money that is left was used on relatives and neighbors. As for the silk that Gu household sent, those are worthless when sold. So, I left them for your little sister. While talking, she looked extremely dissatisfied at Shu Huan. You didn't forget, right? Your little sister is 3 years younger than you. After 2 years, she will be at the marriageable age. She isn't as blessed as you to marry into a wealthy family and live the life in luxury. In order for her future family.in.law to look highly at her, wouldn't we need to prepare a large dowry? Shi was still explaining, but the more she talked, she suddenly felt a sense of sourness in her heart. When she raised her eyes, she saw that the decoration of this room was in gold or silver. The gauze lower garments of Shu Huan and her delicate head ornament made Su Shi green with envy. She couldn't control her emotions and said, a bit aggrieved, now, you reached so high in the social ladder. I and your father doesn't hope to be able to shine in your light. However, your little brother and sister are still young. You should take a bit more care of them. If you can help them, then help them. You can't eat and drink well and look at your siblings starve to death. She wanted to go on, but Xu Huan felt that if she continued to speak, she, would become the most shameful person to ever exist since the ancient times. Not only was she not filial, she was also ungrateful. So, she quickly raised her hand to stop Su Shi. She said, wait for a moment. She turned and went to the inner room. She took out silver money from a small box inside the jewelry box. She put it in her hand and weighted it. The silver money was heavy and gave good feeling of touch. This was the monthly payment she hasn't even gotten for 2 days. She originally wanted to save it and lay out another road for her. She didn't expect that the parents of the original owner would come over asking for money. Presumably, she couldn't save this money now. When the silver money reached Su Shi's hands, Xu Huan clearly saw her eyes shone and even her whole face bloomed. The gaze she looked at her, with also turned gentler and more affectionate. Xu Huan sighed, I've just married and haven't accumulated anything. I only have this 10 silver liang. Spend it more carefully. While talking, she looked at the food box on the table. She said, in the future, there is no need to spend money to buy things when you come here. Gu household doesn't lack anything. There was one sentence that she didn't say. Wool comes from the sheep's back. She didn't want to be the small sheep whose wool was always shaved. Moreover, marriage in hope that the great event of joy would drive away bad luck and hasten his recovery was selling a daughter in disguise. If Gu household didn't give enough betrothal gifts, who would be willing to marry their daughter off? If one was unlucky, there was the chance that she would be a widow for her whole life. From this, it could be seen that this Shu couple didn't lack money. At least, they were much richer than her. They came to cry and complain just to get more money. Thinking till here, her mood fell. Why did she feel that the way Su Shi looked at her was like looking at a money tree? To repay the original owner for occupying her body, it was no problem to help her family within the limits of her ability. However, if the other party kept taking her as a stupid pig to kill, she didn't want to close her eyes with a smile and didn't want to help people without gratitude and be regarded as a fool. Obviously, Su Shi didn't know her thoughts. She really took her as a fool. She touched the money and smiled for a while. Suddenly, she said, these past few years, your little sister had been picking up your old clothes. They were so sloppy that they were beyond recognition. I think that this silver could be used to make 2 sets of clothes for her first. The rest wouldn't be enough to chew on for 2 months. While talking, her gaze fell on Xu Huan's wrist, which wore a pair of delicate red golden bracelets. Xu Huan followed her gaze and smiled, so. She shouted, Liangchen. Shi panicked a bit, why call the maid? Xu Huan didn't answer. After a moment, Liangchen raised the curtain and entered the room. Did second young mistress call me? Xu Huan reached out and untied a bunch of keys from her waist. She handed it to Liangchen. Open the storage box and take out the 2 pieces of fabrics that eldest young mistress sent over. Liangchen went away. Shi wanted to stop her, but Xu Huan already said laughingly, I don't have other things, but I have 2 good quality fabrics. Take them and make some new clothes for little sister. A girl must dress up nicely. At long last, Su Shi had some sense of shame. She anxiously asked, is it really alright to walk out so catchingly with them? It's better if you give me more money. I will buy them at a clothing store later. Xu Huan lowered her eyes and didn't look at her as she said, is there such good quality fabrics at the store? Even if there is, it's expensive. Besides, I don't have more money. I only have 2 pieces of jewelry left, but those are given by the elders. It's respectful to wear them every day when I go to pay my respects. If mother feels that taking these things out is too eye-catching, then, I will let someone bring them over. Shi was at loss for words. She glanced at Xu Fu. When she saw that he didn't utter a word after puffing and exhaling for a long time, her face immediately turned gloomy. Chapter 23 You are listening at novelfull.audio. The ins and outs of the matter the Xu couple was really unreliable. However, she didn't carry high hopes in the first place. Naturally Xu Huan wasn't disappointed. So, her eyes looked at the nose pointed at the mouth and the mouth pointed at the chest. She ignored Su Shi. After Liangchen returned with the fabric, she let Su Shi look at it and then respectfully sent them out. Even though Su Shi was very unhappy, she still revealed a smiling expression towards Gu Shiran when she came into the yard. She first asked about his illness and then gentle like the wind reminded him to take care of his body. In the end, she had to mention her reason for the visit. Then, she wished him well and wished him to live a long life. Gu Shiran listened with smile. From time to time, he would add a word or two. His attitude looked very gentle. Su Shi was so happy from seeing this that she praised him for being good-tempered. In fact, only Xu Huan knew that he was a guy full of evil tricks. While he talked with Su Shi, he swept over Xu Huan with a teasing gaze. It seemed that he had thoroughly seen through the reason for Su Shi's visit. It was also clear that he knew what she said to Xu couple just now inside the living room. She felt a bit embarrassed. Xu Huan shifted her gaze and tried not to look eyes to eyes with him. She also didn't look at that excessively flattering smile on Su Shi's face. She didn't mind that Xu family was poor. She also didn't mind that her parents' status was low. However, she minded very much their character. Originally, she thought that it was probably because Xu family was so poor that they couldn't live on or perhaps they were compelled by circumstances, that was why they had to send their daughter away by marriage in hope that the great event of joy would drive away bad luck and hasten his recovery. But now that she thought about it, that didn't seem to be the case. She didn't know what Xu Fu thought about it, but on Su Shi's face was written fully and clearly with the word money. Money, money, money. The only purpose was for money. If she was unlucky after the marriage and Gu Shiran passed away, then they wouldn't give back the betrothal gifts they had received. As for the daughter, let her emerge or perish on her own. If she was lucky, use a long line to catch a big fish. When they have time, they would make a trip to Gu residence. When they go back, they wouldn't go back empty-handed. Thinking till here, she suddenly felt a bit sad. She felt that the ancient way of living was very tiring. Everyone at her side seemed to be born with a kind and clever heart. They understood the way of the world very well. She also had to follow them on keeping a close eye on everything. She couldn't live any more like how she used to live without worries and carefree under the protection of her parents. She stared at the tip of her shoe while her thoughts wandered elsewhere, thinking that perhaps she could never see her parents again until concubine Yun opened her mouth and said, "It's not early anymore. Why don't Master and Madam Law stay for lunch before you go?" Shi quickly raised her hand to refuse. "The 2 children at home are still waiting for us to return home and cook for them. It's not good to let them starve. You see, we originally still wanted to go see old Madam. Now, it's already too late. I must trouble concubine to send the greetings for us. Tell her that when we come next time, we will go pay our respects." Ah! They still want to come. Xu Huan was a bit dejected. She will pretend to be sick the next time they come. Concubine Yun agreed and smiled. She called Xiangqian and whispered something to her. Xiangqian went to the west chamber. When she returned, she had a 3-layered black food box. She saw Xiangqian put the food box into Su Shi's hand. Concubine Yun laughed, "There is not much good things. This is the dessert I made. Master and Madam Law can take this back as snacks for the children. Shi was full of smiles. She praised that concubine Yun was skilled and competent. She almost praised her to the heavens. Xu Huan was dumbstruck. It seemed that this mother of hers was only mean to her alone. She spent 10 liang and didn't even get any gratitude. Concubine Yun got a lot of praises with only a box of desserts. However, when she thought about how Su Shi told her to deal with concubine Yun before, she sighed again. This was probably the legendary saying, at a mouth has honey and the abdomen have a double-edged sword. The highest realm of 2. Faced with 3 knives. It happened that at this time, Gu Shiran looked over with a smile that was not yet a smile. When the two's eyes met, Xu Huan quickly avoided that gaze of his that seemed to be able to see through everything. She went forward and held the food box for Su Shi. I will send you out. Concubine Yun quickly stopped her, it's such a hot day. Second young mistress just came back from paying your respect. It's better for you to take a break. Besides, you are not familiar with the roads of the residence. It's better if I sent them out. Even Su Shi gave her a meaningful glance. She said, go busy yourself with something else. Don't delay on the important matter. The so-called important matter was certainly to make shoes for Gu Shiran. Only God knew that the number of times she touched a needle ever since she was little didn't surpass 10 times. However, when she saw that concubine Yun accompanied Shu couple out, she was relieved. Gu Shiran looked at her with a smile, how do you feel? Xu Huan blurted out, escaped from the death's door. After saying that, she was surprised by her frankness. Gu Shiran raised an eyebrow and raised his body from the lounge chair. Help me get inside. Because there were maids around, she knew that she had a slip of tongue. She didn't put up a resistance and obediently helped him into the chamber. It was weird. She had been working hard on keeping a distance from Gu Shiran. However, she didn't know whether it was because he'd always protected her, but she had to admit that she had an inexplicable trust deep down in her heart towards him, just like how he was inexplicably good to her. After they entered the chamber and there was no one around, Gu Shiran laughed, was it very unpleasant to get along with your stepmother? Ah! Xu Huan was shocked. She had felt that although Su Shi seemed to treat her warmly, but in fact it was unkind and cold. No matter what, she didn't think that it was for this reason. She only thought that Su Shi was as biased as old madam and only loved her younger children. Gu Shiran waved in front of her eyes. Did you become muddle-headed? Xu Huan snapped out of her thoughts and quickly concealed, no, nothing, that I thought you didn't know that she was my stepmother. Gu Shiran revealed a meaningful smile, when asking for a marriage, one should at least know the other's family. Not only do I know that you have a stepmother, but also that you have a pair of twin younger stepsiblings. This news wasn't as shocking as the previous one. Xu Huan didn't have any out-of-the-ordinary reaction. It was just that she was suddenly a lot happier. She finally knew why the original owner had been heartlessly married to Gu household in hope that the event of great joy would drive away bad luck and hasten his recovery. Gu Shiran continued to say, your pair of step-siblings just turned 12. Your little sister is called Shu Yu. Your little brother is called Shu Huai. It seemed that your whole family is full of happiness. PFFF, Xu Huan couldn't help but laugh. Fortunately, there was no one called Xu Shuang. Gu Shiran looked once smilingly at her and said, I heard that your biological mother died when giving birth. When you just turned 1 year, your father took a second wife. Your stepmother thinks that your unluckiness caused the death of your biological mother and that you are someone with bad luck. She had beaten and scolded you since you were a child. The most severe occasion was when you were 13. She beat you so gravely that you didn't breathe anymore. Your stepmother was still unwilling to let a doctor come see you. If it wasn't because your father stopped a passer-by from the pharmacy, presumably at this time you would have already reincarnated. It was like listening to a story of someone else. It felt very strange. No, she was listening to someone else's story now. Xu Huan secretly remembered the experience of the original owner. Gu Shiran still continued, since that time, I don't know whether it was because your stepmother felt remorseful or that she felt one is bound for good fortune after surviving a great disaster, she beat you a lot lesser. However, she still continued to scold you severely. Having said that, he suddenly grabbed her hand and looked careful at it. What are you doing? Xu Huan was startled and wanted to retract her hand. Gu Shiran then let go of her and smiled slightly, you see, your hand still has a layer of callus. It could be seen that you worked very hard before. Not only this. Her arms and thighs still had some faint scars. Originally, she thought that the original owner was playful when she was a child and left them by accident when she fell or bumped on something. Only now did she know that it was because Su Shi had beaten her. Thinking till here, she was suddenly worried. Gu Shiran knew so well about the original owner. Would he notice that she was a fake too? What she was afraid of would come next. The next moment, Gu Shiran's eyes locked on hers. I'm a bit curious. You are used to being beaten and scolded since you were a child. Your personality is also weak and timid like your father's. How come after you married me, you seem to be a lot livelier and more quick-witted? This question came too sudden. Xu Huan was utterly unprepared and was immediately at a loss for words. Chapter 24 You are listening at novelfull.audio. Losing when taking it seriously, the two looked at each other for a moment. Gu Shiran laughed first, why don't you say anything? Xu Huan was helpless. She could only insist, what do you want me to say? You remember things about me better than myself. Why don't you tell me why it is like that? Gu Shiran's eyes had a trace of craftiness in them. You really want to hear the answer? Xu Huan nodded. His tone turned dully, there are two explanations. The first one is. Xu Huan didn't say anything and waited nervously for him to continue. In the end, she discovered that this person had the talent of not resting before making people astonished because of his words. He said, you are not Xu Huan. It was so close to the truth, so Xu Huan's heart beat faster and she panicked a bit, if I'm not Xu Huan, then who am I? I haven't finished yet. Then continue. The second explanation is that even if you didn't die on the wedding night when you committed suicide by hanging, you went through the death's door. So, now you have a duller look on life and death. If one doesn't even care about life and death, then the way she would look on other things would be more open-minded. Was he talking about himself? If she remembered correctly, when the original owner committed suicide by hanging, he was shocked. He also almost died. Also, Gu Shiha had told her that his second big brother was very bored and dull. The present second big brother is a lot more interesting. The aura he sometimes revealed would let people not dare to show lack of respect for him. While she was still thinking about this and that, Gu Shiran's gaze swept over her. Which explanation do you think is more reasonable? Of course the second one. Even if she knew that it was the wrong one, she had to blatantly admit to it in fear that she would expose her true identity. The people of ancient times were very superstitious. Who would know how they would look on the matter of time? Traveling. On the bright side, it was reincarnation in someone else's body. On the other hand, it was another soul seizing the body. No matter which one, it wasn't accepted by the world. Gu Shiran raised an eyebrows and revealed a though-provoking smile, I also feel that is the right one. If you aren't Xu Huan, your parents would have long caused an uproar. After half a day, it turned out that he was suspicious of her identity. She was a fake. She lied to Gu Shiran. Even though, she knew that she had no right to be angry, she still said a bit annoyed, it's right to be cautious with a marriage, but do you have to investigate so carefully? Is it that old madam even investigated through our 18 generations? No. Gu Shiran said with self-ridicule, how would old madam spend so much time and effort on me? I let people go investigate. You. The answer was unexpected. Xu Huan frowned, you investigate so carefully because you are afraid that I will harm you. That is not the case. Gu Shiran reached out for the crystal fruit plate on the table and picked up a peach. He held it in his hand and looked at it for a long while before he raised his eyes and smiled. I just wanted to know for what kind of reason someone would commit suicide by hanging on the wedding night. His tone was light and sounded more mocking than serious. Xu Huan didn't know whether he was joking or not. Then, she realized that Gu Shiran's face suddenly came closer to hers. In his eyes flashed laughter and curiosity. He lowered his voice, you hate me so much that you prefer to die instead of spending the wedding night with me. Xu Huan panicked a little, no, that's not it. Gu Shiran's voice lowered even more, then, what is it? He should ask the original owner about this. How would she know? Gu Shiran came a little closer, too shy to say it. Or is it that you don't want to say it? His nose nearly touched her face. Xu Huan's heart almost jumped out of her chest. She quickly took a step back, it's just not that. Why do you have to ask so thoroughly? Oh, Gu Shiran narrowed his eyes slightly and smiled, since it's not like that, why don't we have our wedding night now? When he said the last words, his voice was almost inaudible. Xu Huan took a step back and one more step back. She touched her face. It was so hot that it burned. She said angrily from shyness, now it's daytime. Gu Shiran didn't care, then, at night. F **** me. Xu Huan finally got anxious and swore. Lecher. Pervert. Get far away from me. Her voice just fell when she felt a pain on her forehead. She was flicked on the forehead by him. Don't swear. Xu Huan rubbed her forehead and refused to comply, did I swore? I rubbed the table, rubbed the floor, rubbed the wood, can't I? You can. Gu Shiran casted a sidelong glance at her. Be a bit quicker. Time is worth money. She was speechless. She had to pretend to die. Anyways, she can't roll in the sheets with him. Once she rolled, she would be tied here and wouldn't be able to get out anymore. Xu Huan lowered her eyes and pretended to be mute and deaf. How could she had thought that Gu Shiran was at a higher level? She heard him heave a very long sigh. My self-esteem is hurt. Hold back. Ignore him. Gu Shiran sighed again, I've lived for more than 10 years with an ill body. I finally got married. The result turned out to be me being disliked. Preferred to die instead of spending the wedding night with me. Hold back. He had servants to help him move. There's concubine Yun to warm his bed. Besides, he seemed to be getting better from the illness. There was nothing pitiful about him. Gu Shiran's tone turned mournful, that's right. Such an useless person like me whose hands can't lift anything, shoulders can't carry anything, who need the support of servants to walk, who take medicine as a meal every day and who was waiting for Yanwang's brush to fall on the paper to go to the netherworld, who would be willing to marry me. It was better to die sooner to let my wife remarry while she's still young. Endure the internal injury. Xu Huan complained, why do you have to curse yourself? Gu Shiran's gaze turned sad. What I said is the truth. Could it be that you don't think like this? I didn't think like that. Xu Huan was at loss for words. She choked till her face got red. Her emotions inexplicably turned fretful. There was an uncontrollable impulse in her heart rushing out. To just confess. Regardless of the consequences, it was better than to be restrained to death by the saying, a hidden trouble hard to mention. Just as she was about to reveal everything, she didn't expect that Gu Shiran's mournful expression would vanish at this moment and he revealed a mischievous smile, I was teasing you. Why did you become so serious? Shu Huan was tongue-tied. In her heart, she stabbed at him 100 times, 1,000 times, 10,000 times. Gu Shiran saw that her expression was not right. He immediately stretched and stood up. He yawned. I suddenly feel a bit tired. I will go take a nap. When it's time for lunch, no need to call me. You can eat first. Shu Huan hasn't recovered yet from her anger as she pointed at him. She was so angry that she couldn't even speak well. What about me? Gu Shiran took a few steps and then came back. He looked at her and reached out his thumb to flatten her frowned eyebrow. He said laughingly, don't be angry. When you are angry, you are very ugly. See, you are more pleasing to the eyes like this. While talking, he lazily walked to the inner room. This person is hateful, too hateful. Shu Huan sulked alone in the same place. She obviously knew that she obviously would be fooled by him, but she still was fooled by him. She didn't know whether she should scold him for being treacherous and sly or scold herself for being a fool and an idiot. While she was thinking about that, she raised her eyes and saw concubine Yun pull away the curtain and came in. She, seemed to be in deep thoughts. When she met her eyes did she snap out of her thoughts and smiled, second young mistress, I already sent out master and madam. Law. Should I go let people prepare the table now? Chapter 25 You are listening at Novel Full. Audio. The fragrance of agarwood. It was a quiet afternoon. There was only the song of the cicadas. After working hard all morning, the maids had been sent out for a lunch break and a nap by Shu Huan. She didn't have the habit of taking naps. She would only close her eyes for a short moment unless she was very tired. Otherwise, if she slept during daytime, she would feel dizzy and uncomfortable when she wake up. When she was idle, she didn't know what to do. She then suddenly recalled Su Shi's words and slipped into the study. She originally thought about drawing a picture as a gift for Gu Shiran since she didn't know how to do embroidery. After all, although he was a bit of a tease and his happiness often came from making fun of her, but he really took care of her these past few days in Gu household. Otherwise, she would never be free like now and she didn't know how much she would have to suffer. However, when she wanted to paint she was in trouble. She had painted with watercolors before, but it was not the same as the classical ink and wash painting with a brush from the ancient times. Even if she could paint it, presumably no one would be able to make something out of it. Then, she could make a sketch using gombi. But that seemed to be too time-consuming. She may not be able to finish it. Besides, the ink, brush and paper were very valuable in ancient times. She could come up with a lie to cover up that she, a daughter of a poor family, could recognize some words. But, if she could paint, then it would be too strange. Gu Shiran knew about the original owner so well and he was also very sharp. There was a high chance that her background would come to light. With a sigh, she grabbed a brush from the jade brush pot. While she was in deep thoughts, she turned the brush. Suddenly, a jade-like hand extended over to her side and put a cup of tea in front of her. Shu Huan raised her head to check and saw that it was concubine Yun. She couldn't help but smile. Didn't you go take a nap? Concubine Yun shook her head. The maids have all rested. Someone had to keep watch in case second young master wants tea or water. So kind of her. Her heart was full of second young master. If she asked herself honestly, Shu Huan knew that she couldn't be like her. Why? Even if she had to pretend, she wouldn't be able to. Her feelings had always been the same regarding concubine Yun. She couldn't say she disliked her, but they were surely not close. The two often talked, but they knew about their status. It was polite and alienated. It was not like how she casually got along with the maids. Therefore, she didn't have anything else to say after the question. She felt that it was very awkward with the two facing each other silently like this. Fortunately, after concubine Yun stood for a moment, she pulled out a yellow hard object from her purse. She used a small knife to cut a small piece of it and put it in the silver burner with a lotus pattern. It had a sweet and cooling scent. The fragrance stayed and didn't scatter for a long time. The smell was very comfortable. Xu Huan took a few deep breaths. She felt that her mind turned clear. She couldn't help but wonder, what kind of fragrance is this? Concubine Yun smiled slightly. She handed her, the hard object in her hand, this is yellow agar. Xu Huan lowered her head and looked at that thing. It was hard and a bit heavy. It looked like a small piece of wood covered with a little bit of scars. She sniffed it. The fragrance was very light and seemingly absent. She didn't expect that when it burned, there would be such a strong fragrance. Yellow agar, Xu Huan muttered twice. She hesitantly asked, is it fragrance of agarwood? Concubine Yun nodded and pointed at the scars on the yellow agar. These are also called partridge stripes. It's one of the many kinds of agarwood fragrance. I got it from old madam. I thought that when second young master feels unwell, I can burn a piece for him. It can liven people up. It's just that this yellow agar isn't a top-grade fragrance. The aroma scatter fast and don't last that long. While she talked, she sighed slightly. She lamented in her heart. The top-grade agarwood fragrance was very expensive. Even if Gu household was doing business in fragrances, they also rarely used it. Anyway, the fragrance wouldn't reach this yard. Xu Huan knew nothing about fragrances. Just now, she was just lucky to have guessed it right. It was just that fragrances of agarwood and sandalwood were very famous. When she heard the word agar, she was able to guess that it was agarwood. Hearing her, say that, she was more curious. There are many kinds of agarwood fragrances. Concubine Yun put that yellow agar in her purse. She smiled, that's right. There are more than 100 kinds. There is one kind that is solid and will sink into water called water agar. The one that float on the water is called chicken bone fragrance. There is also ripe yellow fragrance, wood fragrance, green laurel fragrance, water chestnut fragrance, chicken tongue fragrance. Xu Huan was already overwhelmed when listening to their names. She couldn't remember them at all. Concubine Yun also probably knew that she couldn't remember them. She suddenly turned and walked to the shelf in search of something. She took out 2 books and put it in front of her. Gu household has books about fragrances the most. Here, at second young master's, there is also a lot hidden. If second young mistress wants to know about these, you can read these 2 books that are for beginners. Alright. It was boring to be idle. Learning more was not a bad thing. Xu Huan agreed. After she agreed, she felt that something was not right. However, she saw that concubine Yun didn't reveal anything on her face. Presumably, she had long known that she, knew how to read from the maids. She couldn't help but laugh at herself. Does concubine Yun know how to read? Concubine Yun lowered her eyes and said, I've learned some. Only the basic. Those were modest words. Naturally, Xu Huan wouldn't take them seriously. Perhaps, she was even a talented woman like Xie Daoyun and Su Rulan. However, she didn't understand more and more why concubine who had the looks and talent and who was also a legitimate daughter would fall to the point of becoming someone's concubine. She wanted to ask about it, but after all, she wasn't so familiar with concubine Yun that she could have a chat with her. Besides, being a concubine was not something very prideful. She didn't speak anymore to avoid touching the painful topic of others. After concubine Yun retreated, she flipped through the 2 books. They were fully written by hand. The handwriting was beautiful. She couldn't help but speculate whether this came from concubine Yun's hand. She turned a few pages. She saw that the identification and clarification of agarwood was extremely well explained. She suddenly got an idea. Since she couldn't draw, what about carving something from agarwood for Gu Shiran? Of course, she wasn't proficient in carving. It was just that in the past, she was obsessed with engraving seals for some time. She had done a thorough research on all kinds of stones and also had carved many seals. However, she had never carved something out of wood. While she was thinking, her hands felt a bit itchy. One was because she couldn't think of what to make for Gu Shiran. Second was because she was so bored. She wanted to use this to elevate the boredom. After all, no matter if she made something great or not, it was something from her heart. However, where can she find agarwood? The one concubine Yun has wasn't a top-grade one. It was also too small. It was not suitable. If she went to ask one from old madam, it was simply looking for an abuse. If she went to buy one outside, she didn't have any money. No matter how she thought about it, she could only go find one person to solve this problem for her. She didn't know if he was willing to help her. When she counted the days, Gu Shiran's birthday was the day after tomorrow. It seemed that she didn't have much time to waste. She didn't care anymore whether he would help or not. She had to try first. Xu Huan closed the book and tiptoed to outside. Seeing that concubine Yun was sitting in the room with her eyes closed to rest, she didn't disturb her. She went out to Yangchen and Meijing's room. She called one of them and whispered, "I have to bother you to go to fourth young master's. If he has some spare time, ask him to come over. When you ask him over, be more careful and don't let old madam know." Chapter 26. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The wonderful redwood of Inga. In the afternoon, the sky was a bit cloudy and it was also windy. The leaves of the trees made whooshing sounds because of the wind. Xu Huan sat on threshold at the entrance. From far away, she saw Gu Shihe walk towards Plum Flower Pavilion with his study companion Ranmo. When he arrived, Gu Shihe extended his hand in front of her. In his hand was a piece of a yellow and green item. It was an agarwood, the size of half a palm. "You got it." Xu Huan happily reached out her hand to take it, but Gu Shihe had unexpectedly retracted his hand and put his other hand in front of her. There was also an agarwood in his other hand, but this one looked dark and firm like a horn. Gu Shihe smiled proudly. "When this young master look for it, isn't it very easy? I will test your eyes. Which one do you want?" Xu Huan was very honest, "I lack knowledge in this field. You can pick one for me." Originally, Gu Shihe wanted to make things difficult for her, but seeing her like this, he suddenly felt smug. He showed off with the two pieces of agarwood. "Did you see? This yellow with green one is soft redwood named Wonderful Redwood of Inga. It's the top of the top grade. This black one is a corner of agarwood. It's also a good thing, but it isn't as rare as the Wonderful Redwood of Inga." Xu Huan wondered, "Redwood? Isn't it agarwood?" Gu Shihe looked at her with a weird expression. "You are really stupid. You don't even understand this." Xu Huan was dissatisfied, but it wasn't good to offend him. She only muttered, "My maiden family doesn't sell fragrance. It would be weird if I knew. Why don't you tell me?" Gu Shihe hadn't spoken yet when Ranmo spoke first. "Redwood and agarwood come from the same tree. Redwood contains a lot of oil. It can be cut softly with a knife. When you bite it, it's soft and sticky like rice cake. It also has a spicy taste. Agarwood is very hard. It's the residue of the wood and doesn't have much taste." He hadn't finished yet, when he was stomped by Gu Shihe, so talkative. "Do you think this young master doesn't know?" Ranmo was a clever one. He also had been with Gu Shihe for a long time, so, he had long known his temper. He then put on a pitiful face. "Am I not giving face to fourth young master? You see, even I, a study companion, know about this. Then, won't you be even more knowledgeable?" Gu Shihe was bootlicked very happily. He immediately revealed a prideful expression. "So true." He turned and asked Xu Huan, which one do you want? Naturally, I want the best. Shu Huan pointed at that wonderful redwood of Inga. I want this one. Gu Shiha's face sank and he was apparently unwilling. When Shu Huan saw him being like this, she quickly said, if you like this one, then give me that black agarwood. Anyway, I only want to use it to carve a seal. The material doesn't have to be top-grade. Carve a seal. Gu Shiha's eyes turned very big and he almost vomited blood. Even Ranmo said with a bitter face, second young mistress, you want to use this to carve a seal. Their reactions were very strange. Shu Huan said a bit unsettled, can't I? I know it's rare to use wood to carve a seal, but... Gu Shiha interrupted her and waved that wonderful redwood of Inga in front of her. Do you know how much this is worth? Seeing how serious his expression was, Shu Huan tried to guess, more than 100 silver liang. Gu Shiha wanted to vomit blood very much, that small piece of black agarwood was already worth 500 silver liang. Even if this wonderful redwood of Inga was sold for more than 1,000 silver liang, there would be people who will fight over it. Old Madam's satin cushion was hidden inside the agarwood box. If it wasn't because I took it out, she wouldn't even give it to me. So expensive. Shu Huan was a bit disheartened. Gu Shiha humphed once and said, it's so expensive. Did you think that agarwood was lowly cabbage that was sold in a basket at a market? She wasn't someone who cared about face. It didn't have any meaning to be looked down upon by a little brat. The problem was that she didn't like getting things for free from people. Originally, she wanted to use the jade annulus that old madam gave her to exchange for the agarwood. Now, hearing Gu Shiha say this, she couldn't take out that jade. She could only lower her head and sighed, forget it, I don't want this anymore. Let Ranmo go check if there are some good stones for carving at the stores outside. Let him bring 2 for me. While he is at it, also help me buy the tools for carving. She didn't expect that as soon as her words fell, something would hit her lap. She lowered her head and saw that it was that wonderful redwood of Inga. She raised her head flabbergasted. She saw that Gu Shiha had his lips curled and said, this master isn't someone stingy. If I say that I will get a piece of agarwood for you, I will get it for you. But it's too expensive. Expensive. Gu Shiha laughed pejoratively, what if it's expensive? To Gu household, this money is nothing. Old madam likes this wonderful redwood of Inga just because it's rare. While speaking, he came closer and whispered, I will tell you a secret. There are a few more pieces that are larger than this one at old madam's. Wait for this young master. I will get them piece by piece. Shu Huan got scared because of his words. Don't do anything rash. Gu Shiha held his head high, humphed once and ignored her. Shu Huan thought for a moment. Then, she helplessly took the jade annulus from her waist and handed it over. I know that this isn't worth much money, but it's not good of me to take things for free from you. Take this first, all right. In the future, when I find something more interesting, I will give it to you. Gu Shiha swept once over it, but he didn't have the intention to go accept it and said with disdain, this young master already has a half room full of these and don't even have more place for them. Only you would see this as a treasure. So depressing. After getting to know him these days, Shu Huan knew that this little brat was just a bit mischievous and stubborn. He wasn't a bad kid. However, even if he didn't accept her things, could he not be so direct? Did he need to make her feel so uncomfortable? Since he didn't accept the jade, Shu Huan could only take it back. She put that wonderful redwood of Inga under her nose and sniffed. Sure enough, a gentle and elegant fragrance filled her nose. Using such a good thing to carve a seal was really a pity. She thought for a moment and said, why don't I use this to carve a string of fragrance? One can wear it and it would also elevate the senses and drive away dirt. Gu Shiha lifted his mouth and said, whatever you want. He turned and left. While walking, he said, I'm leaving. It's so boring here. Remember to put in some good words about me when second big brother is happy. Let him bring in some new and fresh things for me to play with. Shu Huan agreed to do it and then hurriedly said, let someone buy tools to carve things for me. Gu Shihe didn't even turn his head and complained, women are so troublesome. Looking at his back leaving with the study companion, Shu Huan contemplated. If the wonderful redwood of Inga was really so valuable, then the silver she could get from reselling it would be enough for her to live half of her life. She shook her head and pressed down the desire in her heart. This thing wasn't hers. Although, she got it through Gu Shihe, it was actually taking Gu household's things to turn it into a gift for Gu Shiran. At most, it was that she presented her kind feelings to Buddha with borrowed flowers. If she really sold this thing and used the money to leave Gu household, then she'd be deemed as too despicable. She would feel uneasy and carry a guilty conscience for the rest of her life. Shu Huan stood up and sighed deeply. Chapter 27 You are listening at novelfull.audio. The carved rabbit. When Shu Huan got the tools for carvings that Ranmo secretly sent over, the sky was already faintly dark. The gift was a birthday present and naturally, the recipient couldn't know about it beforehand so that there would be a surprise later. Thus, Shu Huan hid those tools and that wonderful redwood of Inga very well. As if nothing had happened, she went to eat with Gu Shiran. After that, she found an excuse saying that she ate too much and need to go out for a walk. Then, she dragged Liangchen and Meijing to the yard. Concubine Yun chased after her and handed her a small white jade box that was roughly the size of a thumb. She smiled slightly. Second young master asked me to send this over, it's mint cream. If you are bitten by mosquitoes, it wouldn't itch anymore if you rub some on the bitten area. While talking, she gave her a small porcelain bottle. If second young mistress doesn't like mint flavor, there is also camphor grass that can be used to avoid mosquitoes. After Shu Huan said thank you, she took them. When she turned and wanted to leave, Concubine Yun said, second young master said that second young mistress shouldn't go too far and should come back soon. I got it. After Shu Huan promised, she let Liangchen walk in the front with the lantern to lead the way. She then walked out of the yard. Without the moon shining brightly during the night, then when evening fell in the ancient era, it would be really pitch dark. Tonight, the sky happened to undergo a change of weather. The moon was covered by clouds. Liangchen didn't walk too far with the lantern. Besides, it was windy, and the tree shadows were swaying as the leaves rustle back and forth. Under such circumstances, there was no one in the garden. It was a good time for chatter. Meijing was a bit less courageous. She couldn't bear it anymore. Second young mistress, it's so scary outside here. Why don't we go back? Can't we just take a walk in the yard? Shu Huan laughed, if you are afraid, you can go back first. Meijing also had a lantern. She could go back alone, but when she turned and looked, the way where they came from was already hidden in the boundless darkness. She immediately felt frightened. How would she dare to go back alone? She only stuttered, it's better if I follow you. Shu Huan came out to find a place to carve that wonderful redwood of Inga. There was no need to go far. She went to the gazebo she visited last time and sat there. She then let the two maids rest the lantern on the stone table and took out wonderful redwood of Inga, studying it carefully from all sides. From the outside, this redwood didn't seem any different from other dry wood. However, when the carving knife went into it, she could see that there was a layer of dark green inside it which felt softer. It was difficult to use such material to carve fine things. If she made a fragrant string, she would need a lot of work to polish it. Shu Huan looked at it for a long time. Suddenly, a thought popped up in her mind. She didn't have to make it finely. It would be fine if she carved the general outline. This would make it easy to carve and would not waste too much material. While she was thinking, Meijing couldn't hold it in any more and asked, second young mistress, what is this? It just looked like a rotten wood, but the fragrance coming from it is very pleasing. Xu Huan couldn't help but laugh. In this house of fragrances, there was finally someone as ignorant as her. She didn't answer yet when Liangchen said, "This is fragrance of redwood, right? I've seen bracelets made from this at Madame's. However, they weren't so fragrant." Xu Huan nodded. She thought for a while and asked, "Do you know which of the 12 animals of the 12-year cycle second young master belongs to?" Mei Jing shook her head. Liangchen thought for a while and then said, "Second young master's zodiac seems to be the rabbit." Rabbit. That was really unexpected. She felt that Gu Xiran's zodiac should be a fox. Well, at least a rabbit was easy to carve. Xu Huan smiled slyly. Then, she picked up the knife and began to carve. Mei Jing looked from the sidelines and asked curiously, "Is this the birthday gift for second young master?" It had been a long time since Xu Huan carved something. It felt a bit unfamiliar to her. At this time, she didn't dare to distract herself and was focused wholeheartedly. When she heard the question, she only let out a sound. The two maids had been taught from the moment they entered the residence. They knew that if the owner didn't want to say something, they shouldn't ask much. So, they stayed at her side and quietly watched her carve. Because she didn't have to carve finely and this wonderful redwood of Inga was also very soft and easy to carve, not long after, the outline of a fat-bellied rabbit was carved out. The more Xu Huan carved, the funnier she felt it was. Her knife moved like it was flying. She didn't know how much time had passed. When her senses returned, a short dot-tailed rogue rabbit with eyes of a bee and a rounded nose was in her palm. When she looked up, she saw that Liangchen and Mei Jing had a weird expression. So, she picked up the rogue rabbit and waved it in front of them. "Is it not beautiful?" Liangchen bit her lips. "It's beautiful, but the appearance of this rabbit seemed to be too obscene." Mei Jing's childish innocence hadn't faded yet. She came closer and looked. Then, she smiled and said, "I think that this chubby rabbit is quite interesting. It's just that we don't know whether second young master would like it or not." She already finished carving it. Even if it was not good, there was no other way. However, if the future generations got to know that she used such a valuable wonderful redwood of Inga to carve a rogue rabbit, presumably they would scold her for wasting natural resources recklessly. Xu Huan felt half rueful and half excited after a mischief. She held the rogue rabbit and looked at it from every sides. Then, she made a small hole in the back of its head. She thought that she would wipe it when she goes back and then put a silk string through the hole. After that, it could be considered that she finished the job. When she thought about it, she felt funny. Originally, she wanted to carve a seal and a fragrance string. She didn't expect that she would carve a waist pendant in the end. It was just, she didn't know whether Gu Xiran would be willing to wear such a unique pendant. Speaking of it, this kind of thing was really easy to carve. It seemed that if she was idle in the future, she could find a few pieces of wood or radishes to play with. Liangchen pointed at the pieces that had been carved off on the table and said with some regret, "You don't want these anymore." These, Xu Huan put all those pieces together and used her hand to force them into a ball. She didn't expect that they really could stick together like soap. She put it in her purse. "Keep it. It may be of some use in the future." Speaking till here, a cool breeze blew over. She sneezed and felt that it was a bit cold. She asked, "How long have we been out?" Liangchen thought for a moment, "At least 2 shirchen, that is 4 hours. Now, it was deep in the night. After Xu Huan said, "Oh no," she hurriedly packed up the things. With the rogue rabbit in her hand, she grabbed a lantern and ran back. Liangchen and Mei Jing chased anxiously behind her. "Second young mistress, take it slower. Don't fall while running too fast." She rushed back to Plum Flower Pavilion. When she saw that the lights in Gu Xiran's room was still lit, she felt more reassured in her heart. She quickly sent the two maids away to sleep. She sneaked quietly into the study to find a place to hide the tools of carving and that redwood rogue rabbit. Then, she patted her clothes, tidied her hair, did as if nothing had happened and raised the curtain of the room. The moment she lifted the curtain, she smelled a delicate and sweet scent. Then, she saw that concubine Yun had her long black hair unbound. She sat on the edge of the bed with semi-transparent satin clothes. She was doing needlework with the help of the candle on the bedside. Gu Shiran had a book in his hand and was lying on the bed with closed eyes. Seeing that his breathing was steady, it was apparent that he was asleep. The scene in front of her was very heart-warming. It was obviously beyond her expectation. She originally thought that since she came back later, she would probably face that stinky face of Gu Shiran. While she was shocked and she didn't know whether she should walk in or walk out, concubine Yun heard the movement behind her. She hurriedly stood up, smiled and whispered, "Second young mistress has returned. Second young master couldn't wait anymore and slept first. The stove in the small tea room is still keeping the nourishing soup warm for you. If you want to drink, I will go pour a bowl for you." Shu Huan shook her head, "It's already very late so I won't drink it anymore. You can go rest." Concubine picked up her needlework and retired quietly. Under the candlelight, Shu Huan looked at the swaying bamboo curtain in front of her. Then, she turned and looked at the sleeping Gu Shiran. She sighed in her heart. It seems that she really had to think of a way to vacate the east chamber. Otherwise, if she encounters such awkward situations again, she wouldn't even have a place to retreat to.